happy with all the programs that were open. But we were talking about Chris Pakula's Martello Shots deck. I was commenting on Homeward Path as, I think a totally defensible choice as the last couple of lands in this deck, given how many Dak Fadens have been running around Vintage Super League in the past. But in fact, this set of 8 decks, there's, I think, a grand total of 1 Dak Faden in the entire league this season.
Yeah, we didn't end up going that direction with, I think, the kind of the overall set of decks that were played. I mean, you just see a lot of shops lists. And I think people have moved away from kind of the more dirtily mentor decks, which it still remains to be seen, I think, how big of a part of the metagame those will end up taking. But that's the natural shell probably to play like a copy of Dak Faden. And then Grixis Control, I think you're playing a variation on that. Yep. You're obviously more like Pyromancer or Cabal Therapy based. But the true control list of Grixis obviously play a Dak Faden or two. But just, I tried that last season of VSL. I don't think the deck's quite there. And I think that's kind of the general consensus now.
Yeah, I think he's going to wish he had creature lands because he's got matched up against Landstill this week. Let's look at Eric's list. Landstill, which Eric said he chose in part because he believed he was going to run into Shots decks. He felt like the league was going to have, 2 or 3 Shots players amongst the 8 players, amongst his 7 opponents, in fact, is how from his perspective. And so he thought this gave him all the game. He's got a ton of lands in particular, so that he thinks he can just kind of negate that Sphere of Resistance, Thorn of the Amethyst side of the attack, and the ability to just drop a standstill and attack with creature lands is a pretty solid victory condition.
No, I think that's definitely true. I mean, my guess is he's still going to be a small dog on the play in game 1.
Okay.
On the draw in game 1. But any other scenario, I think even on the draw post board, he's a favorite. And I think on the play game 1, he's a favorite.
Yeah, look at the sideboard. 2 copies of Kentucky Wars Wage, 2 copies of Stony Silence, a Disenchant, and Energy Flux.
Yep.
He is ready for this matchup. His main deck is, like you say, he's probably a dog on the draw in game 1, but either way, after sideboarding, he should be in great shape. So you
the
like...
one Decree of Justice is kind of hot.
Say again?
The one Decree of Justice is pretty hot.
There's some card choices in this list for sure. The main deck Crucible of Worlds is another nice thing that he's got for this matchup. I mean, yep. Wasteland is just not nearly as punishing for him as it could be.
Right. Well, lets him compete on the same axis that the Shops decks are playing on, right? Where they're also trying to get the Crucible advantage going, so he can play that game right back at them.
Yeah, 4 Wastelands of his own.
Yep.
I don't know. I like this list. Do you have much experience playing a list like this? Because I don't, and I kind of wish I did.
I've played Landstill, but not with Monastery Mentor. I've played it a decent amount in Legacy, some in Vintage. My guess is it obviously plays differently in Vintage because the format is so much more, I'd say, it's generally more aggressive, more focused. But the Monastery Mentor is an interesting angle in the deck.
Yeah, that's the blue-white version of Landstill has not been popular historically. It feels like it's been more of a blue-black deck over the years. I think that the basic shell of what Eric's got going on here, he took from a deck that top-aided the NYSE tournament a couple of weeks ago. Big East Coast Vintage tournament. They had 150 players, gave away tons of Power 9 cards to the top 8. That was a big tournament, and this deck did pretty well. You know what won that tournament, by the way?
What won that? Dredge, I assume.
Dredge won that tournament.
Dredge wins every real-life Vintage tournament, I feel like, because people just don't respect it enough or don't.
I don't think it wins every. It does, it makes a run. There's usually like the one guy that makes a run and takes advantage of everybody being soft with Dredge. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see, what is that tournament and what does this VSL result do to Eternal Weekend, which is coming up. We're close to having our first match up. Well, we should not much longer. Oh, we have the first matchup. Great. We can talk more about Eternal Weekend later. Meanwhile, let's see what happens. Chris Pakula and Eric Froelich are each 2-0 at this point. Neither player has picked up a loss. The winner goes to the finals with a loss to give. And the loser will have to play against one of us. All right. It looks like Eric is on the play. That's good news for him.
Yeah, definitely.
Jeez, does he just land Mox Balance?
That seems pretty strong.
I mean, essentially, you mind twist your opponent is the idea. Balance is a card that is incredibly powerful. I feel like it's underplayed in Vintage. because it does so many things. Sometimes it's a mind twist. Sometimes it's a super cheap Wrath of God effect. Sometimes it's an Armageddon. Just a incredibly powerful card. I mean, I guess he could also go Mox balance.
I like making him discard the extra card, especially when you have that wasteland to follow up.
Sure. Yeah, here is the Pearl, the Sapphire. He plays the Flooded Strand. Oh, he's just going to pass. Wow.
Well, I guess he has enough mana to be able to pay for balance through a thorn, and this way, if Pakula goes for the turn one lodestone golem, he gets extra value from this balance.
Wow. Eric Froelich, ladies and gentlemen. This man knows how to play Magic because I don't know. It would have been hard for me to resist the turn one balance, and he's going to get exactly what you just pointed out. He's now going to get a lodestone golem in addition. He's going to balance to 1 land, 0 creatures, and 4-ish cards in hand.
He'll balance the
Then
zero lands
wasteland.
actually. He'll waste that workshop before he balances.
Waste the workshop after you balance, right?
If you do it after, then Chris gets to hold an extra card in his hand. Oh, I see. You just play. No, yeah. I think he wasted first.
But then you're effectively wasting your own land, right? Because now you're balancing
Right.
lands instead of 1.
But he'll have the backup Tundra and 2 Moxen in his hand. His deck operates really well on 3 mana. He doesn't need that extra land.
So essentially, you can trade the flooded strand that's in play for a card in Chris's hand. That's a fair point. Wow. Now, do you brainstorm first and see if you can find any more?
If you brainstorm first, then you can't cast balance this turn.
Because of the lodestone golem.
Yep. Although you say Eric's fine with that happening. He does want to shuffle away this misstep, and he's going to lose the fetch land if he were to balance the way that I thought he would, which is playing the wasteland. He had to shuffle no matter what to get the mana. Yep. So he couldn't. I like this line. So now what he can actually do is he can. Oh no, he can't. So I thought he might be able to fetch for no land and be able to balance away a second workshop, but he can't because he needs to pay for the lodestone golem.
Yeah, he just balances next turn. He's hoping Chris will play another lodestone, and then he plays 4 mana to balance away 2 creatures. Yep. This is insane. Eric Froelich is just like puppeting Chris Pakula. He's got his hand up Chris Pakula's shirt. It's like, here, do exactly what I want you to do.
Yeah, I mean, he needs Chris to have a very specific hand for this to work. Like, imagine instead if Chris just plays Chalice on 2.
Chris is never playing Chalice on 2. Chris might play
against the standstill balance deck. If Chris plays Chalice on 2 right there, the game's over, right?
I understand. I'm just saying, like, Eric had a plan. It was a better plan. It's going to work out better than your plan or my plan.
I think only because Chris didn't may have taken a more aggressive line than he needed to. I don't know.
How do you not play your other lodestone golem with the workshop deck?
Yeah, it's again. I'm not saying I would make the other play, but I think there's certainly at least some risk involved in this line.
Granted, Eric opened himself up to Chris making the psychic play of Chalice for 2.
Eric also needed to have like Chris has to have a second lodestone golem in his hand,
or which is
unlikely for that to matter.
Or a Forge Master. Forge Master and a land.
Well, no, he only had 1 mana, so you need to have Forge Master plus Workshop plus a second Mox.
No, I mean, he has Workshop Mox. I mean, but Eric, by passing, is going to get either a Forge Master or a Lodestone Golem. Because, I mean, they're artifacts, right? So they don't actually cost extra. Any mana source from Chris would have allowed him to play that Forge Master.
Isn't Forge Master 5 mana?
Yeah, 3 from the Workshop, 1 from the Jet, and then any mana source would have turned it on. All right, so Eric has pulled the trigger on Balance. Balance is away 2 Lodestone Golems. He actually doesn't get any cards out of Chris's hand because they were both at 3 apiece. Doesn't get any lands because they were both at 1 apiece. Oh, he loses a land of his own.
Yeah.
But he does get to balance away 2 Lodestone Golems.
But he's still just losing this game unless he draws swords here, I think.
The fact that Chris has 3 creatures to attack with is unfortunate for Eric, granted. All these workshops is also bad news for Eric, right? I mean, I think Eric's line here was amazing. And the fact that Chris had 3 different copies of Mishra's Workshop, so he was able to get one of them wastelanded and still be able to pump out Lodestone Golem and Codolph Forge Master. And I see your point. It would have been hard for him to play the Forge Master through the wasteland. That's the part.
But yeah, so once he wastes that workshop. So here we're going to see Chris gets to play Tangle Wire, attack or leave Forge Master up, end of turn, bring in probably Sundering Titan, blow up those 2 lands.
Yeah.
Or just Summoning Titan right away. Uh, yeah, you can
Eric,
Summoning Titan right away because they're gonna tap down the white swords. He can't even swords it. So
well, I
yeah,
mean, Tangle Wire taps almost everything here, right?
right. So you play Tangle Wire, you play Mana Crypt, you sack Crypt, Chalice, Mox to go get Sundering Titan, blow up both Tundras, say go.
And now the game's just iced.
Play the Crypt first here, definitely, Chris.
Well, there's a Chalice on 0 in play. You can't play the Crypt.
Oh, sorry, you're right. Excellent point. I forgot things on 0. So he's gonna set the sack with 3, which is still fine.
Yeah, Tangle Wire plus Sundering Titan locks up everything unless Eric is holding Swords to Plowshares. But
Yep.
if he was holding Swords to Plowshares, he probably would have already played it.
Yeah, there's no way he's playing a Crucible that can't even put a land into play right away over swordsing the about to be active Forge Master here.
Chris Pakula is going to win this game despite Eric's great line with that balance. I feel like Eric extracted maximum value from that balance, and it just wasn't good enough because Chris's draw was all workshops and fatties.
Right. I mean, the balance was only a 2 for 2, right? If you look at in card advantage terms, the balance was a 2 for 2. Whereas the balance on turn 1 would have been a 4 for 1. So I'm not convinced. I understand like Eric's line, and it definitely like, got 2 priority cards out of Chris's hand, right? He might not have, he wouldn't have gotten as good of cards, but it let Chris just happen to have a rebuy on it. So I think I suspect Eric's line was definitely right. I suspect it was right, but I think it's not as clear to me, and I want to think about it some more.
Yeah, I think it's the Wasteland that makes Eric's line super tempting, right? Because he can waste the first workshop, and then if Chris doesn't have an additional workshop,
Right.
he's just not going to get to cast the rest of his hand. And so balancing the creatures away is going to ice the game for Eric. But the fact that Chris had not just a second workshop, but a third one meant that, yeah, the Psychic line might have been to attack Chris's hand instead of his mana. Really interesting.
The obvious line was turn 1 balance. I think Eric's line was more complex and harder to find. But probably worse against this specific hand from Chris.
But better against, no.
I suspect better against his range. I think Ephra found like a really hard to find good line there that happened to work out really badly against Chris's specific hand.
I think I agree with you. Wow, that was a super interesting game. Chris Pakula.
Go ahead.
Up a game now. This is actually a rematch of last year's finals, too. Eric and Chris played for the VSL Season 2 final, so a little bit of history here. These guys seem to do pretty well in Vintage, that's for sure.
That's very true. I mean, I imagine Chris plays among the most Vintage in the league, like probably Chris, Rich, Steve, you.
Luis plays a lot as well.
That's also true. Luis plays a ton on Moto. But I think it's certainly rewarding him for his experience in the format. And then Eric obviously just like on a general Magic heater and just playing tremendous Magic right now.
Yeah, I mean, Heater, I think, minimizes it. He's just a great player at this point. #1 ranked in the world, and every time I watch him play, the ranking makes sense to me. Look at this sideboard. Now we find out what happens. Chris basically needed to win that game. And if Eric could have taken game 1, then get to sideboard in, Kitaki, second Kitaki, Stony Silence, Energy Flux, he'd be in great shape. Down a game, though, I feel like Chris has still got a very good shot to win the match. He only has to manage one of these next 2 games.
My guess is Chris is a favorite, but not a huge one. Like, not as much as you'd expect being up a game.
Yep, I think I agree with that.
Like, he's probably like 75-25 dog in each of these games. Or probably 80-20 on the draw and like 65-35 on the play dog. But I'm making those numbers up, obviously, but something, and that's my intuition is in that range. But here we're going to see what Energy Flux, Disenchant, 2 Stony Silences, and 2 Katakis come in for the 4 Missteps, the Flusterstorm, and the Misdirection.
Yeah, it's pretty. Your deck gets a lot better when you're playing against shops and you have mental missteps in your list.
Yeah, you made green verdicts here.
Wow,
it's like maybe better than like.
I mean, what do you think?
The draw seems bad, but on the play seems good.
You're taking out the missteps, the misdirection, the Flusterstorm. That's 6.
Those are dead. Yeah, those 6 are dead. Those come in for the 6 artifact cards. Then it's just like Dig Through Time is probably not at its best in this matchup, but I assume you want both of them still in. So really, it's just like, do you want the Spell Pierce? Do you want the Decree of Justice? Decree is nice though because it doesn't get thorned.
Yeah, I think I've got 4 Swords to Plowshares in my deck. I don't think I want a 4-mana sweeper.
Yeah, I think I agree with you.
All right, Eric Froelich on the play. He's got Ancestral Recall. He has no acceleration. I mean, turn 1 Ancestral, turn 2 Mana Curve is turn 2 Mana Drain is a pretty good mana curve. Not necessarily good enough for vintage though.
I
Let's
wonder if
see.
Chris keeps his hand. I don't think he does.
What, he has to go Mox into Soul Ring into Sphere,
Sphere.
and then yikes.
And that's to draw a land to be able to play anything else.
He is on the draw, so he gets. But wow, I don't think I keep that if I'm Chris.
It
I mean,
depends on how good you think Trinisphere is. Like if you think Trinisphere is great, all you need to do is if you draw a land on your first turn, you just jam Trinisphere.
kept it, kept the draw. Yeah, that sets up turn 2 Trinisphere. Or if he top decks a land, Homeward Path. There you
Yep.
go, doing work.
So turn one Trinisphere, I mean, seems fantastic
Turn 1
as a
Trinisphere does
matchup.
seem fantastic. It's going to take a lot of the sting out of this Ancestor Recall that Eric's going to respond with.
Yep.
Eric basically is going to respond with Ancestor Recall, and he really needs to find a Force of Will because I don't think he wants to fight his way through that Trinisphere. He can
Yeah.
help.
The thing that surprised me most about these shops lists is they only play one Trinisphere. The card just seems so good every time
It's restricted.
that would explain why they play one. Thank you for enlightening me. I was so confused. Chris had it against me in his opening hand both games, so I was like, oh, he must play like three of these.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely restricted. You could play 4 of them for like 6 months. It did not take long to find its way onto the restricted list.
It makes total sense. The card is absurd. So we see a Containment Priest, which actually I forgot about, but makes sense against the card Force
Oh,
Master.
Master, sure.
Although I think you still get I have to read Containment Priest, but I think you still get the triggered ability out of Sundering Titan, so it's not.
I don't remember. All right.
Yeah, let me take a look here. Oh no, it exiles instead of entering play, so it doesn't enter
Never
the
comes into
battlefield.
play. The Titan never triggers. So Chris follows up his Trinisphere with a Sphere of Resistance. Those aren't the best of friends. Sphere fakes things cost 1 more, but it means a 2-mana spell goes up to 3 for either the Trinisphere or the Sphere. Sphere does not stack on top of the minimum 3 that Trinisphere imposes. But you still do what you got to do.
Can you delve to pay for the extra? You can,
Yes.
right?
Yes, you can
I thought so.
overdelve to pay for those effects. Stony Silence, activated abilities of artifacts no longer getting paid. That means no Soul Ring, no Mox Emerald. Chris is now sitting on 1 mana and basically locked under his own stuff. Okay, Ancient Tomb helps, but still.
Yeah, he gets to add another thorn to the board if he wants to here, right? He has
Good.
enough.
I mean, got to be a little bit nervous about locking himself out, especially versus an enemy wasteland. Yeah, and Eric is just like, no spells for you. I've got more land than you. This is great. And now, down comes Kitaki.
Yep. And
Chris
that'll be a
before-
quick little concession here, I think.
I mean, Chris he has 1 land. He can pay to upkeep 1 thing. If he could, for example, keep the Trinisphere around.
He has to let it all go, though, I think, and just dismember the Kataki. Like, the Trinisphere, Ephro can just pay for. He has 3 mana. So
Yep.
it doesn't really do anything here.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm just saying he has the option to keep around 1 artifact. I think you're right that the better play is to let them all go and spend that 1 mana on a Dismember that is suddenly castable without any taxes from Trinisphere or Sphere of Resistance. He looks like he might pay to keep 1, though.
Weird. He kept Soul Ring?
That doesn't sound right.
I think he may have paid for the wrong one by mistake, or
Did he forget
definitely
about
kept Soul Ring.
He forgot about the Stony Silence, maybe?
Seems unlikely. I don't know what just happened there. Okay, yeah. I mean, the game was over no matter what there, I think.
Yeah, no, he was dead. I don't know if that was a misclick. I certainly don't think he obviously didn't want to keep a Soul Ring that couldn't tap for mana there, but he wasn't getting out of that. Like,
Yeah, not at all.
And
we saw him bring in those Dismembers, which makes sense. Probably also bring in. Actually, might not bring in anything else. It might just be the Dismembers. Duplicant seems a little bit slow to try to take out Kataki.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Kataki usually comes down, and then suddenly whatever mana you have, you're spending to keep some artifacts around.
Right.
It's hard to cast a 6-mana spell after Kataki hits the table in your opponent's turn.
So I've played next to no shops in my life. My gut here is that the Revokers are kind of medium. Although maybe on the play they're fine.
I mean, they turn off Moxes, is what they do. I mean, think of them as 2-mana Avalanche Riders.
Right, but Ephraim only plays 2 Moxes. they're relatively low impact otherwise. I don't know if they're better or worse than like. I assume the duplicate in the main deck comes out. Maybe the metamorph comes out. I mean, metamorph lets you do some just unfair things sometimes, but it's like a kind of a high variance card.
All right, Chris will be on the play this time. He can go turn
Can't keep
1
back,
Ancient Tomb for Thorn, but without any workshops in that hand, he doesn't really want to play Thorns and make all of his stuff cost more. So takes a mulligan, comes up with not quite turn 1 Forge Master. He's 1 mana short. It's just a
You have to
turn.
keep this though, right? You have to go Wasteland. You have to play Wasteland Emerald Thorn next turn. Workshop Forge Master.
Yep.
That seems pretty great. You need to protect your workshop from a wasteland here by not playing on turn 1, which is huge.
Certainly a keeper. I don't want to go down to 5. That seems
Yeah.
really keep. Especially on the play. Right, he gets to put Thorn onto the table before Eric can do anything. Eric is sitting on Spell Pierce, Ancestral Recall. But, yeah, there's going to be a Thorn in play. Those are 2 mana spells. Suddenly. And Chris does do the smart thing of playing the Wasteland on turn 1 instead of the Workshop, not so that he doesn't expose his good land to Eric's Wasteland.
I wonder if Eric wastes Wastelander. I don't think so. I think he needs. Oh, definitely not now. They drew Kataki.
Okay, now we see where this game is going. You just play, yeah. Oh, he plays Basic Island. I might have played a fetch land there because that beats Strip Mine.
Soul Ring is actually a very good draw here. It'll help him. It pays for 2 things with the Kataki, or lets him just upkeep, use his. Oh right, he can't wait. It paid for itself. Why didn't he play Soul Ring?
He didn't. I don't know why he didn't play Soul Ring. I mean, he could have. Chose not to.
That might bite him.
And Kataki is a creature, so the Thorn is making non-creature spells cost 1 extra, but Eric can drop it right now.
Yeah, if he had Soul Ring in play, did I miss something? He did not cast it. I could easily be missing something, but like if he had Soul Ring in play, he just upkeep, sacks, tap Soul Ring for mana, sacks Soul Ring, Thorn, Mox, goes and gets Sundering Titan, blows up both lands, pays for both his artifacts, and hits for 10, or hits for 7, or has a 7/10 in play.
Yeah, it's got Summoning Sickness, but yeah. Wow. All of a sudden, but no, Eric Froelich has Kataki in play. Chris's artifacts all have an upkeep now. Mishra's Workshop cannot help pay for this upkeep. It can only cast artifacts. So Chris has 2 mana. Does have an active Forge Master, though. How does he play this?
He has to go get Sundering Titan here, I think, and just hope that that Eric either doesn't have another white source or doesn't have a if he had Soul Ring in play, I think he could just sack the artifacts to get Duplicant here, if he still has it in to take out Kataki.
Oh.
But since he'd have to sack the Forge Master itself, leave yourself with just a Duplicant in play is not going to win this game.
It's possible that he declined to play Soul Ring because if it got countered, then he would be unable to play the Forge Master.
It couldn't get countered. Did he? Oh, he had 1 up to pay for the. What would counter it though? Like, is it going to forcible a Soul Ring?
I mean, the mental missteps that Eric sideboarded out. Like if that's
there's no way missteps are in. Soul Ring's the only target.
There's no chance Eric has mental missteps in his deck. I would not have played around mental misstep if I was Chris. I'm just trying to think he might have been thinking about that, right?
Chris knows that there's no way missteps in. I think he may have just missed that this Soul Ring broke even, possibly.
Right. If it costs 2 to cast, but it taps for 2, so it is a break even there. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you have your line all worked out in your head, right? And you don't really adjust the line for the card for whatever you draw.
So now he's upkeeping, and what is?
He's trying to figure out what to keep.
How does he win this game by losing his? I don't know.
He wanted to sack his Forge Master. He wants to keep the Forge Master.
Ideally, but like he had to draw, like I guess he did draw the artifacts. He gets to.
He's going to be able to play Soul Ring off the Workshop in all scenarios.
No, he does get to wasteland the tundra here, or maybe he just goes and gets. He's attacking.
Wow, Forge Master attacks.
What is going on? I don't understand this line at all.
It's a weird spot. He's attacking Eric's mana. Could have summoned Mox Pearl for, 1 mana through the Thorn. Oh, Thorn went away, so it didn't even matter. Yeah, he could have sacked his artifacts to Forge Master something out, but he chose not to.
Yeah, like what if he just turns the pearl, the emerald, and the soul ring into a duplicate and just eats the Kataki? Assuming duplicate's still, which might not be.
I mean, we both thought duplicate should get sideboarded out. To be fair, right? You and I both said, "Oh, it's never going to come up. The Kataki's going to hit the board and duplicate, and you can then respond with a duplicate. You'll never have enough mana." I gotta assume there's no duplicate in his deck, given because that seems like such an obvious line. If Chris had a duplicate in his deck,
But isn't even that spot like at least just get play Mox Pearl, turn it into a Sundering Titan? I guess then you can't upkeep both, so that doesn't really work.
right? All your mana goes away.
You have the one wasteland, I guess. No, you have the two wastelands. You still have two lands in play. Because you wouldn't need to waste on the Tundra if you get Sundering Titan.
Right. You can also sack Pearl, Emerald, Forge Master to get the Sundering Titan.
Potentially. But yeah, so say your board ends up being Forge Master, Sundering Titan with 3 lands. I don't know, that seems reasonable.
Maybe there's no Sundering Titan in his deck.
That seems kind of crazy then. What's the point of the Forge Masters?
They attack! They're 3/5s! Rawr!
Yeah.
Mostly what's going on is that Eric Froelich has another Kitaki. Showed up loaded for bear. Loaded for shops anyway. Chris is, yeah, Soul Ring can keep... Soul Ring and Emerald can keep all 3 of his permanents. Cavern of Souls off the top. All right, now the Forge Master eats all the mana artifacts. And yeah, there's the Sundering Titan.
Yeah, this seems so much better a turn earlier when it gets to kill 2 lands.
Yep.
You need to play Cavern Souls, right? So you can pay for both.
Yep, yep. I mean that is the better part of doing it here. Is that
he didn't pay. He didn't play the Cavern. So now he's going to lose one of his artifacts. I guess he wants to lose this. Yeah, I don't understand not playing Cavern of Souls there. That seems insane. Yeah, now he loses both his guys.
And the Wasteland from Eric. Wow.
I think that's game.
Well, we're going to have Chris in the booth for next round. He and Eric, I'm sure, will diagnose what was going on here. I'm definitely curious to hear what Chris thinks. I mean, he was in a lot of trouble in all these scenarios, right? Kitaki is going to cause massive problems for him, especially if he sideboarded out the duplicate, which we expected him to do and assumed he did.
I mean, with the way the game is played out, if he just plays the Soul Ring with the first hits he had, I think he's winning this game very easily. Right?
Yes.
Eric never found a removal spell for the 7/10, and he kills him in 3 hits.
All of these things make sense to me. I'm sure Chris had reasons for the things that he did. I'm struggling to figure out what they are. Like I said, Chris and Eric will be in for the next round while you and I go play. Then the winner of our match will be playing, looks like Chris Pakula. Looks to me like Eric Froelich. I mean, it's not over, right? Eric only has a 2/1 in play, and now Chris has a Lodestone Golem, but Eric's also got 7 cards in his hand to Chris's 1 in a top deck. Golem's pretty good here, though, right? I mean, Eric.
Golem's great here. Unfortunately, the Cavern's on Construct, not on Golem, so it can get forcible if Ephro can find one.
He has to find one, though. He's going to go looking.
He does not. He finds a Jace, though.
He's not particularly close to casting Jace, though, given that the Soul Ring is tapping on upkeep to upkeep itself. Yeah, this looks like game on. I mean, Eric has so many cards in his hand, right? He's got the Ancestral, he got the Kitaki. It felt like Eric was in a position. He hasn't seen a force at all. Now suddenly it's the column. And Eric's only got the 1 land. He overdelves with the Treasure Cruise so that he can draw 3. There's the Force of Will finally, but it's kind of a little late.
I mean, he just plays Jace next turn.
How does he play Jace next turn?
Just
Are you
plays
chump
land, right?
hockey?
Oh, right, Soul Ring has a upkeep. Sorry, you're right.
Sol Ring is tapped. Sol Ring does not tap for anything at this point. It is keeping itself around and potentially upkeeping some future mocks, but that's all
Right.
it's doing.
So he plays Jace in 2 turns. Right, because this turn he'll upkeep Soul Ring, play Factory. Next turn, use Factory to upkeep Soul Ring, play Factory, has 5 mana.
Sure.
So he's 2 turns away from the Jace, and this turn he has Forceful up if he needs it.
Yeah, he does have the 1 mana untapped so that he can pay for the Lodestone Golem mana. Wow. Wasteland off the top for Chris.
That's a good draw.
That is a great draw for Chris. Yeah, game on. I don't actually think chump blocking here is insane.
I like jump blocking because then you don't have to upkeep your Soul Ring. You can just
Right, chump blocking, you
play
basically
Jace.
trade Kitaki for a Soul Ring. If he'd known about the Wasteland, the chump block would have probably looked even more attractive. It didn't know about the Wasteland because Chris timed it all well. Eric floats a mana in case Chris is going to follow up with something he needs to force a will. But Chris doesn't have anything, so that mana just goes away.
Huh. I also think that's. But
There's now
playing the Tundra might have been a mistake. Maybe he's supposed to play a Factory there. So he can use the Factory to upkeep the Soul Ring and have colored mana still in his hand to be able to play.
I mean, your other Tundra is still the one that gets wasted.
Right, but then you have Tundra in your hand, so in this spot you can tap Factory, pay for Soul Ring, play Tundra, tap both, play Kitaki.
You won't have the other Tundra. You're losing a Tundra either way.
Last turn he played a Tundra from his hand. Instead of playing the Tundra, he can play the Factory.
Sure.
And then he has a Tundra in his hand, so it would be untapped this turn with Soul Ring untapped.
So he could play Mentor?
So you could, well, he can't play Mentor through Lodestone, but he could play Kitaki or a 2-mana spell.
Okay, yeah, it didn't turn out to matter, but you might be right. And now here's Lodestone Golem coming in, and Eric's still attacking. He's not interested in chump blocking with this Kitaki. He's just trading damage. Now he can do the play he can play a Mentor this turn, but can't follow up with anything else, right? Factory can upkeep Soul Ring. He'll go with 3 mana in his main phase. He can play a 4. Oh my goodness. Wasteland. If he Wasteland. Oh no, Cavern of Souls is. Tolarian Academy taps for mana. I was thinking Wasteland could kill Lodestone Golem, but Academy does tap for 1, so not quite. Soul Ring tapped itself. Eric chose to leave Mishra untapped. He's going to block and trade with a Mishra here. It's actually a pretty nice line if he gets the chance.
Yeah, he can pump and then.
He can activate a Mishra Factory, block, tap Mishra Factory to turn itself into a 3/3.
No, not anymore. Now he plays Tangle Wire pre-combat. To force it, it forces him to spend the white, so he no longer have. Oh, the factory can pump itself, right?
Yeah, Factory can pump itself.
Never mind. I remember how factories work.
The non-summoning sickness. Summoning sick factory can pump.
No, I forgot how factory worked. I thought it cost the mana to pump for some reason briefly. Haven't played with that card in a while.
All right, Tangle Wire. Now, the question is, does Eric Froelich need to force a will this Tangle Wire? And
yeah, 100%.
I agree with you. I'm sure he's reluctant. Often you can wait those things out, but he's got multiple Force of Wills in his hand. He doesn't lose the ability to block this Lodestone. So yeah, Force of Will has to pay 1, pay for the Lodestone Golem. Pitches the Mana Drain, which he doesn't have the second blue for. Now Chris has to decide whether to attack. If he attacks, he sees it. He's attacked into Mishra's Factories enough in his life that he knows what happens.
Yeah, I don't think you want to attack here. That's close.
I agree with not attacking. I don't think you want to attack there either. Now, what does Eric do? He's down to 4 life, but he seems like he's actually stabilized. Finally. The top deck Lodestone Golem made this game a lot more interesting than I thought it was going to be. Eric now at double Force of Will. What is Eric's line? He can't really afford to play that Mentor yet because he'll lose the ability to block with Mishra. Gotta be tempting to try to get that down, though. I mean, he can play a standstill without losing the ability to block with Mishra, but I don't know that he really wants to ice this game. Okay, he's going to use his Wasteland on the Workshop, so Chris is now down to 2 mana and can't really follow up with more threats. Eric is now going to follow up with the Monastery. Tap out for the Monastery Mentor. Cannot block and trade with Lodestone Golem.
But yeah, here he's playing and just chumping with Kataki, I assume.
I'm guessing it's time to chump with Kitaki. Wow, that waste on the Workshop was just in time. Forge Master would have come down otherwise. I mean, he's clearly blocking with something, and yeah, Kitaki. Okay, great.
Yeah, and now he can just stand still, I think, and he's winning this game pretty soundly.
Standstill Monastery Mentor is not the best of combos. Mox Pearl first, though. Yeah, the Pearl spits off a prowess, a monk token with prowess.
Even gets to get in with one of the factories here, too.
Yeah.
So he gets to hit for 6, and that should be game. Oh, Chris almost managed to pull this out.
Yeah, he did. This standstill does seem quite good. Like, icing this game, Chris is the one who's obliged to break it. Because Eric has the ability to trade with the Golem. He has the ability to attack into the Golem. So Chris is on the hook to break the standstill, and I mean, can't do it yet, but eventually he'll have to. And then if Chris does break the standstill with whatever, Eric is going to be able to force a will, the thing that Chris tried to play to break the standstill. You can zoom up.
Should break it himself with Jace.
Say again?
Eventually, when it'll just be lethal.
Sure, he could break it himself.
Especially with forcible backup, so you can just play Jace, trigger, and it's lethal on its own, right? So if he draws a blue source.
Can we zoom in on Standstill and make sure people know what's going on with this card? It's not a card we've seen a lot of in Vintage Super League, but it's seen a lot of play in Vintage over the years. The next guy to play a spell is going to let their opponent draw 3 cards, is what the rest of that text says. Whenever you play a spell, sacrifice Standstill, and each of that player's opponents can draw 3. All right, Eric is attacking with Mishra's Factory into the Lodestone Golem. He has the ability to turn his factory into a 3/3 and trade, which is great for Eric. Now the Golem is gone, and now Monastery Mentor and a couple of Monk tokens and a Mishra's Factory can clean up Chris Pakula. Wow. Eric Froelich, ladies and gentlemen. Efro wants to win this thing back-to-back.
The heater continues.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it was a